Buckle up for the Money Vehicle Movement podcast. I'm Jedediah Collins, your host and driving instructor on this journey through speaking the language of money. Twists, turns, and avoiding those money potholes, we'll cover it all on our road trip to financial freedom. Engines ready? Then let's drive. What does it take to be a pro in today's world? A true professional? That is the question on today's episode of the Money Vehicle Movement podcast. We are going to answer what it takes to be a pro, as well as keep you current and updated on all things happening around your money. We are trying to make financial literacy cool, and we're going to do that by keeping current in story number 1. Why have people's feelings about their money changed recently? Story number 2. How do we make giving a habit with the Gates Foundation? And story number 3. What just happened to save me money on taxes? All of this is going to relate and connect to your money today. And of course, we're going to work through our money vehicle curriculum. But story number 1 today relates to our income chapter and centers around a report out of the University of Michigan. This report said that the consumer sentiment being how people feel about the economy and their money, the consumer sentiment jumped 13% in January and hit the highest level it has been in over 2 years. You can take this back 2 years ago, was right at the end or starting to see the tail end of COVID. A lot of that quote unquote free money from the government was running out, and people have started to panic about what the economy was going to do. Now, fast forward 2 years later, there is a 13% swing in people's feelings about the economy and their money. This 13% swing marks the largest turnaround in people's quote unquote feelings around their money and the economy since the 90s. Feels like everyone is trying to be something from the 90s again. But this consumer sentiment feeling is up. It's reportedly up across all income, ages, classes, and even political parties. Now, this also may be the first time political parties have agreed on anything since the 90s as well. We got to look at what is driving this new change and turnaround in consumer sentiment, your feelings around the economy. One of the main driving factors to this turnaround was that the GDP, the gross domestic product, or the United States economy for short, grew by 3.3% last year, which surpassed the expectations of 2023, even though everyone saw it as a rough year and people were hesitant. We all started to realize and see that 3% growth was still not that bad. Now that almost 60% of Americans participate in the United States economy through investing and have become that investor mindset, we'll learn about that more in Chapter 2. These investors will enjoy the rise in the economy because their investments will rise with it, especially if you are following the B average index investment philosophy of Money Vehicle. But again, we'll get to that in Chapter 6. There was a second driving factor to this consumer sentiment report, and that was that wages are rising even after adjusting for inflation. So as we learned throughout the income chapter, inflation is the weakening of your dollar or the feeling of prices going up. If wages do not rise higher than inflation, then there is no real raise. So think about that. If you got a raise this year of 5%, but inflation was 7%, technically you're net still not making more money. And even though inflation was recently very high, this past quarter and past year saw wages up overall. Pair that with people's resilience to overspend last year because of the fear and because of the concerns, you can see why more people have more confidence. They have more money in their pocket, a nice little raise, and aren't spending as much. So as you measure these two driving factors, the United States economy did better than expected, and people got a little bit higher of a raise than expected. You can begin to see how this consumer sentiment and your feelings towards the economy have risen and changed. Now let's shift to some questions that you can discuss in your classroom. Question number 1. What is the first thing you would do with a raise? I know if I got my money today, another 100,000, let's say $10,000, what is the first thing you would do with those dollars? Question number 2. Do you have an opinion today on the economy? And if you do, has that opinion changed since, let's say, summertime? Maybe it was a cruel summer. Maybe we're going back a few months. Have your view of the economy and of the world and of your money changed in the last few months? And as you look at question number 3, were you surprised that only 60% of United States Americans invest in the economy and become investors? Why do you think it's not 100% of Americans that have become investors? That 60% is a dramatic increase over the last 10 to 20 years than what we were 30, 40 years ago. But it is still not enough. As we learn throughout Money Vehicle and throughout your financial education, we all must start to invest to curtail and to fight off inflation as well as other items that are going to impact our plan. So, why do you think not 100%? Extra credit opportunity and a Money Vehicle shout out for anyone who tags us. If you create a social media post today responding to this question number 3, why do you think 60% should be a good number, or why are we not at 100% of people becoming investors? Respond to that, tagging us, and we will give you something as a gift. Last but not least, question number 4. What is the coolest thing about the 1990s? We see the references, we see the culture, we see some of the cool trends coming back. What is it about the 90s that interests you? Current event number 2 today comes in relating to our cash management chapter and is going to center around our compassion choice. Bill Gates, you may know him as the founder of Microsoft, and his wife, Melinda French Gates, founded the Gates Foundation, and it has since become the largest private foundation in the world. Bill and Melinda have donated $59 billion to the Gates Foundation. $59 billion have been donated to the Gates Foundation just from Bill and Melinda alone. And it is not only large in dollars, but this foundation is large in impact too. One of their most known focuses is for their research going into malaria prevention. I remember this amazing moment when Bill Gates was standing on a TED Talk stage. He was describing the impact of malaria having across the world and how the key spreader of the disease is mosquitoes. Then he paused. He looked at the crowd and said, "There is no reason only poor people should have this experience." And he opened a jar of mosquitoes and released them onto the crowd. As a professional speaker, I admire the ability to create a moment in communicating your message. But I digress. I will say the mosquitoes were harmless, everybody was safe and fine, but the point and the message was made. Back to why we were talking about the Gates Foundation in the first place. Recently, the Gates Foundation has been challenging billionaires to start giving away more of their fortunes, calling out the 2,600 billionaires walking this planet. 2,600 people are billionaires. Everybody on social media all of a sudden is starting to throw that word out. There are 7 billion people, and only 2,000 of them are billionaires. That's not a high number. But as we do look at this 2,600 billionaires, the reality is that they control $12 trillion of our economies across the globe. The Gates Foundation request is for not just to give, but to be more specific in their giving. They are asking for the 1% of the 1% to look beyond the traditional, "I'm going to get a building named after me at my university," and to start to focus on the causes that will save the greatest number of lives. The foundation claims that within 20 years of Bill and Melinda's death, the foundation will spend all $67 billion it currently manages down to zero. Let me repeat that. The foundation is going to give away billions each year for the next and upcoming years, and within 20 years of the Gates passing, they will have spent all 67 billion down to zero. This compassion choice is a habit for the Gates. And while they have plenty, we all know they have plenty, it would be an amazing thing to see this become a habit of the wealthy. As you can look at, your habits are deciding where your dollars go. If you can make the compassion choice a habit and start to impact and give, following the lead of, yes, the wealthy, but also of you, you will see the change in your world today. Questions to bring this topic into your classroom. Go ahead on a whiteboard, on your computers, or anywhere, write out the number 67 billion. Just see that zeros and those things add up, and what is your response to seeing this number actually written out? Now, as you start piecing out a percentage, start to look at 67 billion and cut it up. How much of your class would put X percentage to malaria, or Y percentage to the homeless crisis, or Z percentage to world hunger? Yes, cancer, parks. There are endless causes and things that you can go impact. So look at $67 billion and start to earmark a percentage that will go and impact each cause your class can come up with. Question number 3. Do you think people, wealthy and regular, will adopt the compassion choice as a habit? That is a question I often ask myself, is how can we make giving a habit? Habit just like empowering ourselves and investing in our future, a habit just like paying our taxes and our society choice. How can we make this a habit for both wealthy and regular people alike? Question number 4, and I'm being sincere in this one. Is this even a story? Billionaires giving away billions and having billions left over. Sure, there's an impact being made globally, but should they be celebrated? Is this a story, a headline that interests or concerns you? I hope you have a great response and a good conversation around compassion choice today in class. Story number 3 today is going to be a current event that relates to our society chapter and celebrates the time of year that is coming. It's beginning to look a lot like taxes everywhere. All right, I'm done singing. But taxes, it is that time of year, tax time, where people to begin to gather. So right now we're looking at the time where you are gathering your documents and just beginning to figure out how you are going to file your taxes this year. However, there is an important update that will help save everyone a little in taxes this year. In Chapter 9, we learned there are 7 income tax brackets for 2023, and how much you get taxed is going to depend on which income bracket and filing status you fall in. In 2023, we saw a record adjustment to those tax brackets in response to the record high inflation we were having here in the United States last year. Each income tax bracket is increased by 7%, which means your income tax brackets changed. They got bigger. This may sound boring, but what it translates to for those who speak the language of money is you will be charged for 2 scoops of ice cream, even though you are ordering 3 scoops in your bowl. All right, wait, what does that mean? Okay, for those of you in chapter 9, this is to explain the income tax bracket system, and if you were and have read that, go ahead and talk to the person next to you about what the ice cream analogy actually is. But the translation is that it means each tax bracket will be adjusted for a higher dollar amount, and in doing so, you will be taxed less overall on your income this year. Your marginal tax bracket is the bracket your next dollar would fall into. So if you earned $90,000 in 2023, you would have fallen into the marginal tax bracket of 24%. But with this new change in adjustment because of inflation, your last dollar would fall into now the 22% income tax rate. So your marginal tax bracket would now not be 24%, it would be 22%. And that would save you 2% on your taxes this year. I know 2% doesn't seem like a lot, but think of it as a 2% match from your employer, a 2% higher return on your investments, or 2% that you can go to paying down debt. The idea behind your tax bracket system was to be able to adjust for inflation and help elevate some of its impact. Eliminate some of its impact. This year, if you didn't get the raise you were hoping for, but now you can save a little on your taxes, maybe the tax savings can feel like a raise for you. How are you going to use this in real time and real questions? If you are filing your first taxes, this is going to be an interesting piece. Maybe you weren't even impacted because you're only in the first or second income tax brackets. But if you are making 60, 70, $80,000, this income tax savings is going to be somewhat of a good impact for your financial plan. So as you look at this, questions for the classroom. First off, go ahead and pull up the 2022 and 2023 income tax brackets. For a single filer, can you see the difference? Question number 2, calculate how much your character in your character project will save now with the bracket adjustment. Or if you're not that far into your character plan or understanding how taxes work, look at how just maybe a $50,000 or a $100,000 earner will save this year on their taxes due to this change in their brackets. Question number 3, do you think this was a good move by our government to try to adjust for inflation? Question number 4, do you think that this tax adjustment actually feels like a raise to people, or only the people who really understand what is happening and speak the language of money? That's going to wrap up our current events for this episode of the Money Vehicle Movement podcast. But now we get to dive into our core curriculum focus and the Be a Pro mindset. Fun addition this week. I wanted to include a little bit of my NFL journey as we look at the NFL playoffs wrapping up. This is a journal entry from Wednesday, December 28th, 2011, 8:15 a.m. team meeting. Wednesday morning, week 17, 20 team seasons are done on Sunday, and you better believe they all wish they weren't, because winning in this league means security. My first season playing is coming to an end. After going a few years getting cut on practice squads, this was my breakout year, and with it, the season honors are announced. The Pro Bowl, which is voted by fans, players, and coaches, it's more of a popularity contest, but it is recognition. Big name players get in, no names usually don't. And they say, you don't make it for 2 years that you deserve it, and you stay 2 years longer than you probably should. Coach Payton, Sean Payton, our head coach of the New Orleans Saints. Coach Payton announces 5 first-team Pro Bowl players all on offense. It's no longer arguable. The 2 best guards in the NFL, Carl Nicks and Jahri Evans. Our left tackle, Jermon Bushrod, bust onto the scene and is creating his own name, getting his first nod for the Pro Bowl. Jimmy Graham, who broke the NFL tight end receiving record and then was surpassed by Gronkowski. And, of course, Drew Brees, who broke Dan Marino's record. All worthy of the honor and credit to our offense, even without a running back or wide receiver going, not a real surprise in the land of the weapons down here. There are a lot of stars in the New Orleans sky, but Drew Brees is the sun, and when he is out, all the others can be overlooked a little bit. Next, Coach Payton announces the alternates, the second and third teams for the Pro Bowl. Punter Thomas Morstead, who is still playing after 15 years today. Safety Malcolm Jenkins, who is a partner of the Money Vehicle Movement. Safety Roman Harper, and fullback Jedediah Collins? Whoa. I had high hopes for this year. Heck, I even had a pipe dream of just making it on the team. But it would have been too much and too soon to think I could be amongst the Pro Bowlers. This is perfect. Enough recognition to know I had a good year, but just enough of a taste to realize I want more. When the Pro Bowl was announced, they said my name. My name was said amongst the stars. After my first year of truly playing, I've made an impact and made people learn who I was. That is a point everyone emphasizes. Walking out, Coach Vitt comes up to me and says, "Meat." He always admiredly and kind of jokingly called me Meat. He said, "Meat, come here." Put his arm around me, whispered in my ear, "You earned it." I need to take a step back and realize what this moment means, what I have earned after being cut 13 times in this business. My name was said amongst the stars. Alrighty, last. Alrighty, our core curriculum focus this week is on Income Part 5, the Be a Pro mindset. How do you prepare for a world of employment that is changing by the day? If you were to ask someone who is 40 years old what they were told was the safe career choice, they would respond a doctor or a lawyer. Ask someone who is 30 years old and they would say probably a coder. But the world changes and what you will do will change with it. What your safe career choice is never going to be as safe as you thought. But who you are and the professional you want to be should not change with the world. It should be grounded in three core concepts. Are you confident you can do the job? Does your team trust you can do the job? And does the job you do add value to someone? Those three questions and the principles of confidence, trust, and value are what I found to mean be a pro in the NFL. Words I saw on each of the dozen NFL building walls that I got to walk into. So let's dive into what it means to be a pro. The first step to be a pro. The first step is understanding the difference between cockiness and confidence. It does not take much to walk around and tell people what you can do. Anyone with a voice can do that. It does take a lot to actually believe in what it is that you are saying. The difference then between cockiness and confidence is where cockiness is telling someone else what you believe, and confidence is believing it yourself. The funny thing about confidence is that once you really have it, you do not need to tell anyone because real confidence is seen, not heard. If you want to gain confidence, gain education. Understand the situation and the problem you are facing even better. The more you know, the more confident you become. This does not mean you got to go to college or traditional school or other ways of learning. However, consuming information and becoming an expert on something, any way you want to consume it, will bring you more confidence. The first person who must believe in you is you. But remember, cockiness is your external voice. Confidence is your internal voice, the one in between your ears. The second step of becoming a pro is building trust within your team. A professional is someone you can depend on to do their job and to do what they say they can do. This is no longer your ability to do it, but how the people around you believe you can do the job. Can someone trust how you will get things done and done correctly? My first practice for head coach Andy Reid, now the Chiefs, but was with the Eagles back then, resulted in me having a false start and a Coach Reid coming up to me and saying, "Son, we can't beat ourselves out there." The first words the head coach ever said to me was a lesson, and one I remember to this day because it explained to me what trust really meant. Trust meant Coach Reed knew I could do the job, and I could do the job right each time. I would not be a liability to the team and break the trust of everyone else on the field by beating ourselves. If you want to gain trust, find experience. Show people that you have done it before and done it well. Yes, it is nice to see someone do a task once correctly, but even better to know the person has done that task 1,000 times. A quote I will never forget is that a professional does it until they can't get it wrong, where most do it until they get it right. I was on a plane recently where the pilot announced at takeoff this would be his last flight after 30 years and thousands of miles and trips, and he promised with his own family on board he was going to make sure this flight had a happy landing. Everyone on that plane trusted the captain because of his experience. Most practice until they get it right. A professional practices until they can't get it wrong. If you want to trust in the financial world, you'll need to consult with a fiduciary. Fiduciary, fiduciary, funny word, but it is also a very important word for you to know because most financial products are sold to those who do not speak the language of money and are not bought by those who do speak the language. Fiduciary is a lesson for another day. The third and final step in the Be a Pro mindset is adding value to someone. This idea, you have to always walk in and add value. If you walk into your place of work, doesn't matter where it is or what you are doing with that simple question, how can I add value to someone here today? You'll be headed in the right direction. I always respect backup quarterbacks who understand this concept of value. Having played with guys like Chase Daniel, Dan Orlovsky, Kellen Moore, Luke McGowan, and others who knew there was a franchise guy in front of them and still came into the building every day and asked, how do I add value? Obviously, working with the starter is going to be the first requirement. But then staying after and running routes with receivers, talking through coverages, communicating with the offensive line on blitz packages, and even being a good scout team look, adding value each and every day. It wasn't the glamour of the position that they had hoped for, but they added value nonetheless. If you want to add value, look to finding efficiencies or bringing energy. Efficiencies would make whatever you are doing more productive with less effort. Energy would be having a good attitude in whatever you are doing. So, as you look at that, efficiency makes you more productive. Energy brings the right attitude. Either way, on a daily basis, the small things make a big difference. I hope you watch the video in Income Part 5 on the Be a Pro, where I talk about the real stories of how I learned this Be a Pro mindset, even defining the moment down in New Orleans that my life changed. But the walk away to this section is to be a pro with your money. That means you move beyond just thinking like an investor and start acting like one. Education is great, but without action, education will fail. So be a pro. Be confident you understand the language of money. Find people you trust with your money and build a system you trust for your money. And lastly, continue to look for ways to add value to your money and your plan and your future self. I hope you bring this conversation into your classroom with these questions. Question 1. What is something you are confident in about yourself today? Question 2. Who is someone you trust and why do you trust them? Do you trust them with your money or do you trust them with more? Question number 3. Where can you add value to your schoolwork, hobby, sport, family, or money? Can you add effort? Can you add efficiencies? Can you add energy? Question number 4. What is something you would like to be a pro in? What is a profession that interests you, and what is something you can go get education, experience, or energy towards? Question number 5. Do you even want to hear a story about when I was named to the Pro Bowl? All right, keep listening.